I just want to remind you that because we have such a large group, in order to view the speaker, you might want to change your view to the speaker view. So it's my pleasure to introduce Valarie Kour. Valarie is a seasoned civil rights activist and celebrated prophetic voice at the forefront of progressive change. Valarie leads the Revolutionary Love Project to reclaim love as a force for justice in America. As a lawyer, filmmaker, and innovator, she has won policy change on multiple fronts: hate crimes, racial profiling, immigration detention, solitary confinement, internet freedom, and more. She founded Groundswell Movement, Faithful Internet, and the Yale Visual Law Project to inspire and equip new generations of advocates. A daughter of sick farmers in California's heartland, Valarie earned degrees at Stanford University, Harvard Divinity School, and Yale Law School. Valarie's new book, See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love, expands on her very successful TED Talk and is available wherever books are sold. So please join me in welcoming Valarie Kour.
Thank you so much, Reg. Thank you, Mary Beth. Thank you to all of you. I just got a note from Judy, who's in the audience, and she's saying, remember, you came to us, you were with us in Seattle in 2013 when you spoke at our convocation. So here we are 8 years later, and seeing you all here, seeing your faces, I think, oh, we have stayed in the labor, haven't we? From then to now, and really long before that. And so returning to you all in this moment feels like returning to a sacred circle, returning home to a community. Thank you, thank you, thank you for having me. I want to begin with a greeting from my faith, from the Sikh faith. And you can just let the words wash over you for a moment as you feel your feet on the earth. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. The beloved community belongs to divine oneness, and so does all that it achieves.
She's stunning.
As you feel your feet on the earth, I invite you to lower your eyes or close your eyes for just a moment as we take a breath together. We are gathering in this virtual space, which we are making a sacred space in an extraordinary time in history and in our lives. And so I just want to invite you just for a moment to notice the difference between holding your body up and just letting the earth hold you up. And as you turn your attention inward for a moment, I invite you to get curious about what you're feeling in your body in this moment, today. How are you arriving? We can take a deep breath together, sinking into this arrival as one community. Let it come. Let it go. And as you feel yourself fully arriving, I ask you a question. As you look at this new era that we find ourselves in, what do you see? What do you feel? What are the dangers and what are the possibilities? How are you arriving to this new era? And I invite you to get quiet for a moment and just let a word or image or feeling just come to you. What do you see in this new era we find ourselves in? Now, for those of you who find this easy, I invite you to write the word or image that came to you in the chat. So you can click on chat at the bottom of the screen and just write the word or image, but don't press enter just yet. We're going to witness, we're going to harvest what it is that we're all feeling and seeing together. So you just write it, the word or the image, but don't press enter. All right, Rose got ahead of us on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, enter. Ooh, look at what we are holding in our collective body, in our collective imagination. We are feeling, we are seeing a circle of unity, expectation, life and hope, openness, peace, God, imagination, oneness. Oh, the image of a sunrise. Oh, the sight of families being reunited. We are seeing rest and we are feeling invitation. We're feeling light and we're feeling confusion. We're feeling transformation. We're feeling fire. We're feeling cloudy. We're feeling this sense of swirling all around us, this trust and commitment. Oh, we're feeling a paradigm shift. We feel like we're tending to people with bandaged heads. We're looking up and we're seeing the horizon. We're seeing a blizzard. We're seeing hope. We are wary and expectant. We are breathing anew. We're imagining a lotus unfurling. Oh, my loves, we are tired. We feel tension. And we feel a kind of hopeful possibility for change, for joy, for peace, the promise of a beloved community. Yes, 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 harmony, new beginning. Oh, and the word I see again and again is transition. I just want to take a moment and say, yes, all of these things are true. All of it is true. The darkness and the wariness and the tension, and also the lifting of the gaze and seeing the possibility of what is on the horizon. For this is what it means to be in transition. And the fact that you are all feeling it right now, awake to it, alive to it, here to talk about it. Oh, it means that you are the ones. You are among the ones who will help our country and help humanity in this great transition that we are in. I believe that the forces that we have seen in the last few years, the forces of white supremacy rising to power in this country, the forces of tyranny, the assault on our democracy, I believe that all of these are signs or symptoms of transition. And now that we are entering a new era, like so many of you, I see that this labor of transition really has just begun. This transition, I believe, will last 25 years. Here in the United States, we are becoming more and more a multiracial country. Within 25 years, the number of people of color will exceed the number of white people for the first time since colonization, and that means we are at a crossroads. Will we? Will we continue to teeter on the brink of civil war? Will we see more images like we did on January 6th? Those who resist what America is becoming, a nation that might see my family, my community as part of this country? Or will we begin to birth a nation that has never been in the history of the world? A nation made up of other nations. This grand experiment. Dreams of a nation that is truly multiracial, multi-faith, multicultural, where we strive to protect the dignity and the worth of every single human being. It's a question. Will we birth that America? Will we birth that democracy? And this question becomes existential when we think about the climate crisis. You know this well. If we don't start solving for climate justice within the next 25 years, starting now, there might not be a future for our children or their children or theirs. So will we take humanity across the threshold into a sustainable future, or will we perish? Those of us who are alive today get to decide whether the human race survives or not. This is the work of our lifetime. We will not be the ones who live to see the end of this transition. We can only hope that our children and their children could look back on us here and now and say, oh, they showed up to the labor. They imagined a way to transition us into an anti-racist, equitable, sustainable future for us. And here's the thing. Each of us has a role in that labor. And that's why I was so honored to spend this hour with you all here as we are in February of 2021, as we have an opening, a window like never before to show up to the labor, to show up to transition. I wanted to be with you all because you as sisters, Catholic women, you have been on the front lines of this labor. You have been laboring for so long, for some of you for so many decades already. And you know that we need the policies, we need the Green New Deal, we need the BREATHE Act, we need these big structural reforms, we need those things. And in order to transition our communities, we need a shift in culture and consciousness. That's a revolution of the heart. That is block by block work. That is heart to heart work. It's inviting people to expand their notion of human family to include every single one of us. It's inviting people to see no stranger. And that means that yes, revolutionary love is the call of our times. Inspiring people, igniting people with the call to love, to labor with love. That is the only way we can create a future that leaves no one behind. You know this. Your scriptures, your songs, your rituals, oh, they are filled with the call to love. A love beyond limit, a love without limit. The audacity, the courage to look upon any person and say, sister, brother, sibling, you are part of me I do not yet know. I will grieve with you and I will fight for you when you are in harm's way. That is why each of you have been committed to the work of social justice for so long, that your faith and your conviction to love compels you to show up for the migrant child at the border or the Black brother with a knee on his neck. It compels you to show up now still, even when you are weary, even when you've been in it for so long. So I want to talk to you. My goal for this hour together is to give you even more energy and even more nourishment in that work of showing up with the ethic of love that's you've already been practicing for so long. And this is why I believe it's so important. The call to love has always been dangerous. Always. We can think of any century in human history, any generation. Think of all the spiritual teachers, the social reformers, Jesus himself. Anytime anyone has stood up for the call to a radical love, a revolutionary love, when has it ever ended well? You see, the call to love without limit is dangerous because it disrupts hierarchies of human value. Mm-hmm. And our societies have been built by institutions that cling to these hierarchies of human value. So to show up with love is inherently to disrupt the status quo, the social, political, economic institutions that dominate the world. And yet, more and more of us than ever before are awake to what you have always known. That the only way we will transition humanity and transition the nation is if those of us who believe in the call to love take the reins. Yes. Those of us who carry revolutionary love in our heart, who sing that song, that we are the ones to step in, to lead America, to lead the world through this time of great transition. And it's also never been harder. I know, on January 6th, when we watched the insurrectionists break down the walls and shatter the glass and flood the U.S. Capitol building, It was a harrowing day for my family because my brother-in-law was trapped in the US Capitol building. He's a reporter for CNN, so he was locked in his office and texting us that he was okay, but then we would have stretches of silence, and we didn't know until we heard his voice again on the screen. And that's how we knew he was still alive. I kept imagining the men, heavily armed with the tattoos and waving the Confederate flag, unashamed, unapologetic about their white supremacy. What would they do if they found Manu? What would they do if they found him, not only as a reporter, but as a brown man? Would he make it out? My family and I, we were watching, we were sobbing, my hands were shaking, and when he was finally evacuated, the way we knew he was evacuated was that he was reporting it on a phone, and we could hear it through the screen on CNN, and that's how we knew that he was safe. Only then did I notice what my body was carrying, and it was terror. It was absolute terror. And the terror was familiar. How many times in the last 20 years have I, as a woman of color, as a Sikh American woman, seen people I love in harm's way and been helpless to save them? White supremacist terror is as old as this nation. What was new was that it was directed at the US Capitol itself. And what were they doing, right? They were trying to disrupt a peaceful transfer of power to a diverse coalition of leaders who would see my family and my children as part of this country. You see, as the United States has been in transition, becoming more and more a multiracial democracy, it was only a matter of time before those white supremacist forces would turn on the seat of government itself, the very seat of government that gave it legitimacy, and attack it. Almost like becoming cannibalistic. Those forces aren't going away. Those people aren't going away. And yet when I saw them up on that screen, I just, I could feel rage. I could feel hate inside of me. At the end of the day, I got a call from my teammate at the Revolutionary Love Project. She's helped me build this project the last 4 years. She's a dear friend. And she said, "Valarie, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, but my parents were at the Capitol too, but on the outside of the building."
Wow.
So my brother-in-law was on the inside. And my brother-in-law was on the inside. And her parents, who were part of the protests, were on the outside. And as much as I wanted to see them as monsters, as much as I wanted to hate them, I could only see them through the eyes of their daughter, who saw them as deeply misinformed people who had racist impulses that were just fed and fueled by the demagogue who was in office. People who were deeply wounded. In that moment, I saw what Dr. King calls that single garment of human destiny, that we are all interconnected, we are all interdependent. No matter how much I want to sever myself off from them, they too are part of my community. It may not be my job to tend to their wounds. They probably would never sit with me. It probably wouldn't be safe for me to do so. But it might be hers as their daughter. as someone who could be in relationship with him and stay in relationship with them. When I say that revolutionary love is the call of our times, I mean that it can only be practiced in community. And we all have different roles in that labor. I define revolutionary love as the choice to labor for others, for our opponents, and for ourselves. Now, some of us need to focus on ourselves. Those of us who have a lot of trauma, a lot of grief, a lot of rage to process, to move through. Like my family in the wake of January 6th, we needed people to love on us. We needed to love ourselves. We needed to protect ourselves. We needed to make sure we were safe, right? There might be those of us, though, who are safe enough to love on others. So like ourselves, maybe you're safe enough to love on others, to reach out across difference, to stand in solidarity. And right now, so many Black, Indigenous, and brown people right now need that solidarity. But you might be someone who is safe enough or brave enough to tend to those opponents. Those millions of people, they might be your neighbors, your family members, your students, your nieces, nephews, people in your congregation. And as much as you say, oh, I don't want to or I can't, I say, oh, my love, we need you. I need you. I need you in that labor. For if we leave them alone, Hannah Arendt says isolation is the precondition for radicalization. Who will talk to them? Who will tend to them? Will it be the Proud Boys? Will it be the new Nazi groups rising up? Who will reach them? Who will see their grief? Who will tend to their wounds if we don't? If we don't. All of us have a role in that labor, and what I have discovered is that there are no such thing as monsters in this world. There are only human beings who are wounded. People who do what they do out of their own sense of insecurity or fear or suffering or blindness. That doesn't make them any less dangerous. But if we see their wound, if we listen beneath the slogans and the sound bites and we sit with them and we hear their story and we tend to their pain, we begin a relationship. And a relationship is always the precursor to transformation. We listen to them, we choose to love them, not because we think change will happen overnight, but because listening to them, loving them as human beings preserves our humanity and theirs. And it is strategic. For if we see them as human beings, we can ask ourselves, what drives their behavior? What radio programs are they listening to? What television shows are they listening to? What social media algorithms produce that kind of lie, that kind of misinformation? What leaders, what officials fanned those flames in them? Who put the guns in their arms? You see, we need to do more than resist bad actors. In the process of transitioning the country, that requires us to reimagine institutions of power. And when we reimagine institutions of power, we can reimagine them in such a way that frees even them, that sets even them free from their complicity in oppression. That is long labor, and that is hard labor. And so I invite you again to fall back on that definition, revolutionary love, the choice to labor for others, for our opponents, and for ourselves. Now you might be listening and saying, okay, I can imagine myself showing up to that labor, but I have so much anger. I have so much rage. What do I do with it? I'm ashamed of my rage. Here's what I wish to tell you. I always believed that rage was the opposite of love. That is a lie. Rage is not the opposite of love. The opposite of love is indifference. Rage is the force that we can harness to protect that which is loved. You see, so many women and girls are taught to suppress their rage in the name of love and forgiveness. So many of our spiritual teachings, we think that that's what they teach us to do. And in the meantime, so many men and boys are conditioned to let their rage explode. But the solution is not to suppress our rage or to let it explode. The solution is to honor our rage and then process it into safe containers. When we express our rage into safe containers, what are safe containers? They're containers that make it possible for us to be in relationship with our rage without harming anyone else around us or ourselves. So think about rituals through the centuries, the drumming and weeping and wailing and dancing and singing and shaking and sweating, right? All of praying, all of these containers to process our rage. Once our rage is on the outside of us, we can be in relationship with it. And we can ask ourselves, what information does this rage carry? And then how do I want to harness this energy for what I do out in the world? You see, that harnessed energy, I call divine rage. There are some who still say, no, it's turned the other cheek. It's we're supposed to, we're supposed to choke down our rage as soon as we feel it, because it's something that blocks our ability to fully love others. And this is what I wish to tell you. Oh, and there's some science behind this too. Neurobiologists call oxytocin the love hormone, right? The more oxytocin in a mammal's body, the more nurturing and care she shows for her young. Oxytocin reduces aggression overall in a mother, with one exception: in defense of her young. When her babies are threatened, oxytocin, this love hormone, actually increases aggression. You see, that force, that life force, that energy of rage, it's what we can tap into to protect that which we love. And if we're saying, no, I'm going to love not just my babies, I'm going to love your babies too, and those families, then we're harnessing that rage as a practice of revolutionary love. It's how we fight to protect each other, right? And so the goal is not to let it hijack you, not to let it explode, but process it, be in relationship with it, dance with it, listen to it like a symphony. And then say, okay, what information is this giving me about what is worth fighting for? And how do I want to harness this into divine rage? You see, our wisdom traditions are filled, you know this, are filled with stories, examples of what divine rage looks like. I think of Jesus in the temple, rage flashing in his eyes when he overturns the tables of the money changers. I think of Kali. In the Hindu tradition, my husband's tradition, Kali is the fiercest form of the goddess Durga. She's wearing a garland of skulls. She vanquishes demons, and yet she is revered as the divine mother because she protects us. I think of the 10th Sikh Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, who stood up to empire with rage in his eyes. Divine rage. The aim of divine rage is not vengeance. The aim of divine rage is to reorder the world. To reorder the world in such a way that still recognizes the humanity of our opponents. That's revolutionary love. That's the kind of love that we need now if we're going to transition our communities and our country. We can't leave anyone behind. And so, what does it mean for you to dance with your rage, to find safe containers for your rage, and then only when it's safe to harness that for how you show up in the world? You see, I come from um, a lineage of warriors. My Sikh ancestors were warriors. They fought with swords and shields. And so I use warrior metaphors a lot. You know, how are we fighting the good fight? How are we fighting for justice? And rage is part of that. But I also come from a long line of women, mothers, who pushed through the fire to give birth, to make a life, to make it possible for me to be here. And when I think about them, I think about birthing metaphors. That in order to show up to the labors in front of them, in order to find stamina, in order to find resilience, they had to breathe and push and breathe again. You see, only a subset of men have gone to war, and yet we use those metaphors universally, right? Warrior on, soldier on. When I say that to you, you know exactly what I mean. So too, only a subset of women have given birth, or given birth in the particular way I'm describing. But that experience, that might be a metaphor for all of us. Because creating and nurturing life, that is not a biological right, that is a human right. It's a universal right. And all of us have various creative labors. The labor of raising up a family, of leading a congregation, of birthing a nation. In all of those labors, the midwife might have some wisdom for how to find resilience in the labor. Right? Resilience in the labor. She doesn't say breathe once and push the rest of the way. No, she says breathe, my love, and then push, and then breathe again, and then push, and then breathe again. This will be one long labor. 25 years, at least. This is the labor of our lifetime. And if we're going to last, then I want the wisdom of the midwife in my ear. To birth the nation that must be, to birth the future that must be, I gotta breathe, and then push, and then breathe again. And that comes to this practice of loving ourselves, right? How are you breathing every day? Who are you breathing with? Are you breathing with music and meditation and prayer and song? Are you breathing with each other as sisters, as Catholic women who are so devoted to the labor, so devoted to leading with love and loving others so well? Are you loving yourselves well too? And notice I don't say it's love for myself. I say love for ourselves, because self-care is an illusion. It's not an accurate term. When we're in labor, whether we're in the battlefield or on the birthing table, we'd never do any of those things alone. Right? We need each other. We need each other to breathe together and to push together, which is why I have been so moved by this Justice Conference of Women Religious. And each of you on the steering committee, you have brought us together in community. You have brought these sisters together in community to breathe with each other as we get prepared to push in this new era. And that is a tall order in the time of pandemic, when isolation is all around us, to prioritize that. The togetherness that is still possible, magically, virtually. That's how we love ourselves. So this is going back into that definition of revolutionary love. Revolutionary love. The choice to enter into labor for others, for our opponents, and for ourselves. In any given day, in any given season in our lives, we can ask ourselves, where do I need to be? How do I show up to that labor? And what are the tools that might support me to stay in it? My offering to you, is this book. It's See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love. And I hold it up because I spent a long time, since I was with you all back in 2013 in Seattle at the convocation. I spent all the years since then really thinking about what it means to reclaim love, the love that Dr. King sung, to reclaim love for a new era, for a new time. And my dear friend and mentor, Parker Palmer, has called revolutionary love, this framework, the new nonviolence, because it makes room for our grief, and it makes room for our rage, and it makes room for the necessity to love ourselves in the process. So I spent some time after the 2016 election. I needed to breathe. I left the country. I went to the rainforest. I took my family there. My son was so little, and he was riding on my shoulders as we would hike through the beautiful rainforest in the mornings, and he would play in the afternoons with my parents while I sat at my desk and I looked out my window and I saw the mountains and the mist drift through the valley. And oh, the rainforest was warm and wet and safe and generative. It was like a womb, like I was in the womb, the womb of the earth. And it's there in that place for a year where I dropped in and I asked myself, how do we transition America? How do we transition the world? How do we practice love? And I poured through the stories of my life, and I poured through the case studies of social movements in the past, and I poured through scripture, social wisdom traditions, mine and yours, and I began to see patterns that I've come to call practices of revolutionary love. It begins with redefining love. Love is not a rush of feeling. No, those of us who have done the work of caregiving and caretaking, we know that love is more like labor. It's fierce, it's bloody, it's imperfect, it's life-giving, it's a choice we make again and again and again. And if love is labor, then love harnesses all of our emotions, right? Joy is the gift of love. Grief is the price of love. Anger, rage is the force that protects that which is loved. And when we believe we have reached our limit, then wonder is what returns us to love. Anytime I feel like I'm too tired to wonder about another or feel empathy or any measure of compassion, I just have to wonder about them, wonder about their story, open myself to them. And that is the beginning of my process of learning how to love them. So I, in that rainforest, I began to name these core practices, and they are wonder, grieve, fight, rage, listen, reimagine, breathe, push, transition, and let joy in. And each of these, I see all of you furiously writing notes. Each of these are here. It's in the chat here as well. It's in the book, and we've created this beautiful learning hub that we just revealed. I see my teammate Tracy's in the chat. Tracy, would you drop the link to the learning hub in the chat as well? This learning hub, everyone, is a way to bring what I call a revolutionary love compass to life. And it's all free. It's all available. It's all for you. We just announced it yesterday. So you're the first to really receive it. And we've spent the last 4 years building it. And it includes an educator's guide that you can use in classrooms, but you can also use as adult learners. So now I have this idea, if any of you are sparked by this idea of wanting to go deeper in this framework of revolutionary love that I'm offering, you could read the book, certainly, in community. You can also take that educator's guide and begin to work through it together as a community. I believe, I'm not going anywhere. Now that I have found revolutionary love, it is the song I will be singing for the rest of my life. And it is the vow that I made. We had a people's inauguration about 10 days ago where we said, we the people need to make our own oaths to ourselves, to each other, about how we want to show up in this time in history. And my oath was around longevity. That I don't want to be a woman of color who takes her life or lets other people take her life. I want to last. I want to last for myself. I want to last for my babies. I want to last for you all. And there's been so much trauma I've had to reckon with. People in my community murdered, police brutality, sexual violence, hate violence, mass shootings, and all of those stories are in my book that I didn't know if I was going to last. It's only by uncovering these practices of love, that I begin to understand, I can live my life practicing love every day. And when I practice love as a way of being in the world, then I'm breathing during the labor. And when I let breath in, it creates the conditions to let joy in. To let joy in. I have come to believe that laboring for a more just and beautiful world, transitioning this world with love and with joy, is the meaning of life. Mary Beth, steering committee, you have written these beautiful words that we are prophets of a future not our own. Justice in a world in transition. I can't think of a more life-giving act, a more loving act than to birth a world that we might not be able to live into. And so each of you who you show up every day and you keep showing up and you know that you might not live to see the fruits, the gifts of your labor. I thank you. I thank you, and I promise you this, you will be someone's ancestor one day. They will summon you, they will remember you. And in the ways that you have shown up with so much love, they will not inherit our trauma from this time. They will inherit our bravery, your bravery, and your wisdom. And that's how love transcends everything, doesn't it? Thank you. I want to hear your questions. I want to hear your stories, and I'm ready for that. Thank you. Oh, I'm seeing you. Thank you. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Valarie, for your very insightful and inspirational words, and for reminding us that relationship is the precursor to transformation, and that we do need to reach out in love to those who are wounded. So thank you very much. And now we'd like to take time for questions. In order to have the time for as many questions as we can, we ask that you withhold your comments and thank yous so that at this time we just ask questions. There'll be an opportunity at the end of the program for you to express your gratitude. So just to remind you, to ask a question, you'll need to raise your hand. And to raise your hand, you have to click the participants button or under reactions, the button on reactions, which both are on the meeting controls at the bottom of your screen. And then to select raise hand, the raised hand option. And when you raise your hand in that way, your name will come up on my screen and I'll be able to verbally call on you to ask your question. So who would like to begin? Okay, I have, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce the names correctly, but Letitia Boards? Oh, I see you. Yeah, you have to unmute yourself.
I thought that was
Please unmute yourself. You,
Oh,
can you,
yeah, no,
you see it? Whoops, it's on the bottom left, or well, I don't know if you're on an iPad or.
I'm on an iPad. So
Oh, there you go. Great.
Yes, and I don't have a question. I was playing with the screen to find out how I could raise my hand. So I
Well,
have
now
to
you
think
know.
after all that, I'll cede to someone else.
Okay. Regina
Looks like,
O'Connor.
yep.
Hi, I just have, Valerie, you expressed so beautifully about how we're to go out and to be present and to begin conversations. I was wondering if you had a feeling of where best for us to put our energies at this moment, at this time, where to start those conversations or how to create those safe spaces to allow the conversations.
Regina, I think we begin where we are. We begin right where we are. You're already embedded in a web of relations. So begin with your congregation, begin with your family, begin with your neighborhood. I feel like it's not quite necessary to reach out and put yourself in a place that you haven't been in order to start to find those possibilities for those relationships and those encounters. I think it's just a matter of getting quiet and looking around in your own sphere of influence and say, "Oh, that's where I need to show up." It's sort of the opposite from the work of loving others. Often when we think so of others, opponents, and ourselves, right? The work of loving others are those in harm's way. And often they are out of sight. They're behind the prison walls, or they're on the other side of the border, or they're, in a transient homeless encampment, on the far side of town. And we can live our entire life just not seeing it, and thinking that we are showing up in our fullest capacity. And so often it takes us going to those places, going to the margins, going to the places that most need us, for us to be changed by what we see, what we experience, and that those practices of wondering about others and then grieving with them and then taking that as information for how to fight for them, that requires the stretch, right? But when it comes to loving our opponents, I don't think we have to look very far. Right? I can think of an uncle. I can think from a law school friend. I can think of people who I just feel like I haven't quite been ready for because it's so hard. And honestly, my measure for whether or not I am ready to engage with them and begin this work with them. If you picture an opponent right now, you see their face in your mind. And if your body starts to activate, if your fists start to clench, if your throat starts to close, if your heart starts to beat fast, that's information. And that's probably good information that now may not be the time to reach out to them. There's probably some loving ourselves that needs to happen. There's probably some raging that needs to happen, or some grieving, some tearing, there's probably some healing that needs to happen. Your own trauma needs to be tended to. When I say tend the wound, it begins with our own wounds before we can really tend to theirs, right? But if you think of, and that process might take time. The person who murdered Balbir Singh Sodhi, a man I called uncle 20 years ago, 15 years, 17 years, I pictured him in my mind, and I couldn't even look at that face. Enough years went by that I had done enough healing. Enough people had been grieving with me and raging with me and tending to my wounds so that I could heal just enough to be able to picture his face and not fly into a panic. That's when I knew. When you picture a face of an opponent and there's a measure of serenity in your body, just enough for you to sit with that and wonder about them and follow that wonder, that's information that this might be the time to reach out. And now 20 years later, I talk to Frank Roque in prison. We have these video dates every few weeks, and I'm reading to him my book. Impossible. I could never have imagined it, right? Never. There might be some opponents in your life, you're like, never, that can never happen. And maybe it never will. It didn't have to happen for me. But even just opening up that possibility, of seeing them as a human being who you might be able to wonder about, that itself is transformational. It gives you the ability to give other people permission to tend to them when you can't. Enough people had to be in that prison and tend to Frank Roque over the years. Our act was to say no death penalty, right? No death penalty. Leave open the possibility. That was our act of revolutionary love. Our act wasn't to go immediately and reconcile with him right when Bill Uncle was killed. No, our act was to say, let's leave open the possibility of redemption and transformation and let others tend to him. And they sat with him and they helped him stand the heat of his own guilt and his own shame until he could get to the point where he could apologize to us. And all of those years, we had to let enough people tend to our wounds to get to the point where we could hear the apology. And then magic happened. That took 20 years. What if the people who stormed the Capitol, the people waving the Confederate flag, the people I just wanted to hate, if I open up the possibility that 15 years from now, 20 years from now, they too might be able to be changed, that allows me to take steps now to lead from a place of deep faith and deep love.
Fran Gorsuch, you're up. Your question.
Thank you. I was just withdrawing my hand because I was trying to and I apologize, trying to formulate how to ask it. It has to do with what you spoke about in terms of rage, that we are called to honor our rage and then process it into safe containers. And the examples of you use were ritual, drumming, tears, etc. My question has to do with in community and in the institutional church. Not to compare the two or make them parallel, but I think, at least in my experience, rage is so often seen as anger, come across as anger, and that's something to be avoided. And so my question is, in a community of women who are committed together and who, but are at different places, even in terms of understanding of church and involvement, etc. Is there a way to create a safe environment where rage can be expressed so that the boundaries that kind of maybe between us that are very unspoken, things that are not talked about, become at least porous, if not, if they don't disappear, they at least become porous? How would you recommend beginning that process?
Yeah. To answer that, I want to start by giving you a very simple visual of what a safe container has looked like for me. I didn't really understand the depth of my rage until I became a mother. And I would be angry on behalf of my son in a world that is hostile to him, but I would also be angry with my son. Like he's throwing a tantrum and he's hurting others, hurting himself. And I remember just feeling so angry and then feeling immediately guilty. I must not be a good mother. Until I'm like, no, this rage is information. This is how I'm loving him. I just have to figure out how to work with it. Like I want him to be safe. So I had to figure out how to give myself a safe container. I would go into the closet and I would throw clothes on the ground. And then I learned how to throw pillows on the ground because clothes you'd have to fold afterwards. So I would throw pillows on the ground and then, step away to rage. This is the process of loving opponents. Step away to rage, return to listen, reimagine solutions together. So I would step away to rage. And then when I just I could take a breath. I could wonder about my son again. I can return and listen to what was happening. Before he had even language, listening means to really begin to understand, to seek to understand the context that is driving the harm. And then reimagine solutions. Oh, he went to bed too late. Oh, he needs another afternoon snack. We had to change the context that kept allowing those tantrums to happen. And pretty soon he saw me and said, okay, that means instead of teaching my son to be ashamed of his rage, I taught him to find his safe containers for rage. So now we throw pillows on the ground together, you know? And then he knows, like, no, punching your sister in the arm is not a safe container. Find a safe container, come back. When you breathe through it, then come in. Often you need accomplices with you. You don't want to process your rage with the people you are angry against, right? So I'm hearing that in the church context, when there's rage, there's anger, there's friction. You want to find a safe container with an accomplice who says, I will help you create that safe container. Go ahead and cry. Go ahead and curse. Go ahead and rage. Go ahead, take your fist, do a plan tantrum. This is what V, formerly E. Vensler, taught me. Just like you do a plan tantrum. Like, get it, let it move through your body. Let it move through your body. Don't be ashamed of it, without shame, right? Just as long as you're not creating harm to anyone or yourself. And then afterwards you breathe. And, you know, when you think you've reached your limit, return to wonder. Okay, can I wonder about why they said that? Why they believe that? You know, what is at stake for them? What is behind that facade? It's like, oh, okay, I can wonder about them. I can return to listen. And that's when you can do that listening in community and then start to see solutions you might not have had before, because you're not letting the rage blind you. Now, when it comes to a virtual space, I have found with my teammates, you know, one of them is here, in the last few years, with everything that I have been so enraged about, on the darkest days, you know, the day of the Kavanaugh hearings, or the day of the insurrection, or the day of the hate crime, you know, I found my closest teammates who could be my accomplices. We would have a Zoom call like this, and we would just let each other speak, curse, cry, shake, you know, just hold the space with each other, to let the tears and not try to be perfect, and let it, you know, and then breathe, right? And then breathe and say, okay, all right, well, what do we do now? What do we do next? What is our push? What is like, and why did they do that? Why did they say that? What's at stake? Okay, now I know how to show up next. So you know your church community well. And you know the barriers that people might be experiencing externally or internally around how to be in relationship with rage. So I would probably not start with the whole congregation or the whole community. I would start really small with a subset of women who want to, like, okay, why don't we protect a space here that is really sacred, that is really free, that allows us to process these intense human emotions. And then let's look at okay, now we're going to breathe, and now we're going to wonder, and how, because you don't want to get stuck in it. You want to move through it. You want to dance through it. And you can do that with community. Does that give some ideas?
Lisa Steiner.
Oh, hello. I wanted to ask how you define peace, and whether your definition of peace is possible in our world.
Oh, what a beautiful question. I've never received that question. And you know what? I don't use the word peace very much. I just realized that. I don't use the word peace very much. And why is that? I think for so long, peace has been used as a, you know, to paper over demands for justice. You know, that if we can just be at peace, but there's so much demanding, there's so much marching, there's so much fighting, there's so much laboring, there's so much reimagining that has to be done that does not feel peaceful at all in order to birth the beloved community. So I think if I were going to reclaim the word peace, it would be more like serenity. Like, can I find peace within myself? And I think I have with the revolutionary love framework, and practicing it every day now until it just has become a way of being. It has uncovered deep wisdom inside of me. And that's what I want to mention too. If anything about what I'm saying is resonating with you, it's because it's uncovering wisdom that's already inside of you. This is nothing new. You know, we've been hearing calls to love and justice for centuries, through the millennia. So this is just kind of unearthing what's already there. And now that I've unearthed that in myself, I feel a kind of serenity as I'm in the labor. And I guess I feel a kind of peace as I'm in the labor, right? Because I'm moving with it and dancing with it. When I think about, probably your question is about what is possible, you know, for peace on earth or peace at large. And for that, I really just go back to the words beloved community. I go back to Dr. King. And beloved community is not a world without conflict. It's not a world without grief. or pain or trauma. But beloved community is a community where we are working together through those labors. And so imagine if we were trying to birth a beloved community here in the United States. Can you imagine in the year 2045 that we're not constantly on the brink of collapse and civil war or whatever this feels like, but what if it feels like, a multiracial, healthy, multiracial, resilient future? We still have things to solve. We still have labor to do, a more and more perfect union, right? But there's a way that we're showing up to the labor that is anchored in love. That feels like a beloved community. A beloved community is that which leaves no one behind, right? Not in our calculus and not at the table. And so what I think about the world writ large, I think the same. What if we imagine a future where we're not, as a human civilization, on the brink of collapse, but we've arrived into a sustainable future, nations still finding relations with one another, still trying to solve the deep problems in our countries, right? But we have affirmed the dignity and worth of every person. We have rejected hierarchies of human value. That would be my version of peace, the beloved community.
Marceline?
Okay. Thank you. Valarie, you had a question. What info does this rage carry? And it triggered something in me because when I recently know about trauma-informed care, and the person said when something happens, instead of blaming someone, it's to really find out what happened here. So I just would like, can you talk a little bit more about teasing out the information that our rage carries? Teasing that out so that how do we investigate that? How do we look at our rage to get that kind of information? Can you speak more to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm wondering, would you like an example that's more of a personal family example, or an example about how to do that when you're out in the world working on these bigger issues?
Doesn't matter. It's okay.
Okay. I'll tell you the story about my mother. I remember I'm gonna let my dog in. 1 second. I remember, and I tell this story in the book, when I broke my silence around a sexual assault in my family, there were people in the room who did not want me to do that. And my mother stood between me and them with a rage in her that I just had never seen before. She said, "Not my daughter, she will be free." And that rage in her, it frightened me at first, until I began to ask myself, like, what information did her rage carry, right? It for her, it was, really generations of women in our family who had to just bear it and bear it and bear it and stay silent. And she had had enough of it, and she was tired of it. And the rage that the information that her rage carried was that she wanted to break that cycle, and she wanted to set her daughter free. And the only way that she could be heard was if she showed her rage, right? That was the only way for it to be seen and for people to back off and to say, her rage showed me that I was worth fighting for. And she was helping me tap into my own rage. Oftentimes, anytime I'm analyzing my rage, it's in the face of someone who has hurt me. It's information that I am worth fighting for, that my body has the ability, has the power to protect itself. Too often in the face of the assault, whether, in the face of the sexual assault, my body froze. In the face of the police brutality, my body froze. In the face of the trauma, you freeze, or you don't have the ability to defend yourself, right? But the ability to protect your own body is a human right. And oftentimes we have a disrupted fight impulse, especially as women. We're not allowed to untap the power of our body to protect itself. So after the fact, the rage that we might feel as we're remembering the trauma, usually that carries the information of what is worth protecting. And in this case, for so many of these stories I tell, it's my own body, the sovereignty of my own body, my own mind, that I have worth. That too often internalized oppression tells you a story that you are small, that you are nothing, that you are not enough, that you are not strong enough or smart enough or worthy enough to be protected. And so rage for so many of us who are women or women of color is about recovering our body's ability to find itself worthy enough to protect. And if you feel rage about someone else in harm's way, you know, the babies at the border ripped from their parents, or the indigenous women have gone missing, or all the Black and brown people who are dying disproportionately from this pandemic, it's information. It's information that they too are worth protecting, and it shows you your own capacity to care. So not to be ashamed of it, but to honor yourself around it. And to say, okay, I just can't become what I'm fighting against. I can't look at those opponents who are causing this harm and be like them, hate them back, show up with vitriol, dehumanize them as a result, because that's diminishing you. So working with your rage, honoring it, and then dancing with it, and then wondering again and deciding how you show up with that energy in a way that doesn't tear others down, but imagines a new future for all of us, you know, even our opponents. That is the revolutionary act, and that is hard, and that's why I am best when I do it in community.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Valarie, and thank you for the questions. Now come where I'm going to pass the mic over to Mary Beth to kind of
Wrap
wrap it
things
up
up.
for us.
Valarie, I too want to express my deep, deep thanks to you for your hopeful, inspiring, passionate, and faith-filled words. It truly has been a beautiful gift for all of us to be able to spend this time with you. And it's also a marvelous privilege that we're able to labor together, all of us, to take humanity across that threshold. So thank you. And to all of our participants, now you will have an opportunity to say thank you. We're going to take about 30 seconds. And if you would go to your chat box and express in whatever way the thanks that you want to offer to Valarie for her beautiful, beautiful words and beautiful spirit that she shared with us today. And here they are coming in, very powerful. Thanks for inspiring us. Beautiful message, so inspiring. Inspiring these elder women. Yeah, like many of us aren't going to be here in 25 years, Valarie. We hate to say that, but we've done our job too.
And we will continue the labor because you labored for us.
Yes, absolutely.
One
Look
thing
at
that I have
these
learned from
words of thanks coming in.
they're so beautiful, everybody. Thank you. Truly, when I am with, you know, it was Sister Mary Ellen Burns in New Haven, Connecticut, and it was Simone Campbell of Network. And every time I'm with my Catholic sisters and I sit at their feet and I learn from their wisdom and how they find wisdom and wit and resilience in that long labor. And I know it's because of the community you all cultivate with each other. You embody how to show up to this labor with joy. I'm here because of that. You know I will last because of that. I will continue your labor because of that. And I'm so, as I'm reading all of these beautiful words, I am so grateful to you all. Thank you.
And thank you. And thank you to all of you who participated with us today. Once again, I want to remind you that this session has been recorded and will be available on the JCWR website in the near future. We'll let you know when this event is up and running. And there's the web address of the website. If you're not familiar with that, we'll let you know when this event is up and running. So stay tuned for your JCWR Google group emails. I would also like to extend our profound thanks to Grace Sertival, IHM. She has been our Zoom host who has helped us with all things IT, not just today, but on all of our practice sessions, because we wanted this to go off without a hitch. We're also grateful to Jan Novakov for her beautiful music at the beginning of this session, and also for Jennifer Hopner for overseeing the registration. You see on this slide the dates and the topics for our next 3 sessions. If you haven't already done so, please register for those sessions. Reminders will be sent out. We want to share that each of these sessions also will be 90 minutes long, and they will include a presentation as well as time for working groups in breakout rooms. So these will be interactive in a different way than this session was. The sessions will be the same time as today's session, 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Mountain, 1 o'clock Pacific. And so we look forward to seeing everyone on February 25th. And in the meantime, breathe and push and bring revolutionary love to our wounded yet grace-filled world. Thank you so much, everyone. See you on February 25th. Thank you, Valarie.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.